I'm going to show you an incredibly fast way to cut strips for bias tape. There's no funny loops and no funny folding and lining up. You're just going to cut straight strips. So for this you need a square or a rectangle of fabric. And the first thing I'm going to do is I want to straighten my fabric out because I can see there's a horrible crooked edge over there. To straighten your fabric, place the salvages on each other. Salvages are the uncut edge, the outside edge of the roll. So straighten your fold and straighten the salvages onto each other. And there you can see that edge at the bottom. Just look at that. That's definitely not straight. So I'm just going to straighten my fabric up quickly. And as I said, for this you need a square or a rectangle of fabric. There's no specific size. Of course, the wider your piece of fabric, the longer your strips will be. But they're so easy to join. It's really very easy to join bias tape, and I'm going to show you everything. I'm just going to cut a little rectangle like this. Now, of course, there is a way to make continuous bias tape, but I find it so fiddly to have to cut around in a loop. And with this method, all you need to do is cut straight strips, and I find your accuracy is much better. Okay, so now you want to check your grain line. There's my crosswise and my lengthwise and my bias, which is nice and stretchy. And you just want to be sure that you haven't cut your fabric skew. And then very easily we're going to fold the fabric into an arrow like this and cut nice long strips and join them. So you're just going to cut strips like that. But first let me show you how to fold this arrow. It's so easy. You're going to start at the top corner, pulling it down to the bottom edge to create a triangle, and then take the bottom little corner of your triangle and fold it up to the top. And then you'll have a part where you have two folds, and then the bottom edge where you have one fold. And the bottom edge is the one you want to use to measure from that single fold, because it will give you long strips of bias tape. You don't want to cut from the double folds. Now, there are many different ways to make bias tape. This is a bias tape maker. You get them in different widths. The fabric goes in there. It slides through and it folds as you iron. This one's a bit wider and it has a wider result. And then, of course, you can compare the width of your bias tape. There you can see this is quite a wide one. An existing piece of bias tape. So you just want to choose how wide you want this bias tape. I like a wider one. I like to cut my strips 5 centimeters, which then lets me end up with 2.5 centimeter wide tape. And you can use an existing piece and measure it from there. Or you can guess. Remember, the narrower you cut your tape, the narrower the final result will be. You can also measure your bias tape maker if you have one. I'm going to measure 5 centimeter spots, and all you need to do is that you're going to measure directly. You can see this one's 3 centimeters, and then it's got about 1 centimeter on each side. So it'll actually work for what I'm doing, although you can use pins, a hair clip, anything to iron your tape. You really don't need one of these. And then you're going to cut those edges off first. Now, I didn't because I'm too excited to cut my bias tape, but I'll cut them off now. And basically you're going to measure your width that you want. I want 5 centimeters. You're going to measure a whole lot of dots right at the bottom, and all you need to do is cut parallel lines. And I find this much easier than measuring on the diagonal. And that you're going to cut that fold off. But I just want to show you the nice long strips that you get. So all you do is on this line, you're just going to cut right through. And because you've cut on that single fold, you'll be able to unfold your bias tape and you have these long strips. And of course, you're cutting 2 at a time without that fold on the edge. So you're doubling up the bias tape you're making. So there I've got these 2 of these nice long strips, and I'll be joining them in a bit. I'm just going to finish cutting my 5 centimeter strips of fabric over here so that I can join them easily, which I'm also going to show you. Once you're done cutting, you'll have a whole lot of strips, stretchy bias tape, and you want to join your bias tape on these edges. And I always talk about bunny ears. Your pointy bits go in the opposite direction, your very pointy edges, and you have these little opposite bunny ears hanging down. And you want them to overlap slightly. And to get a very smooth result, you need your corners, your sharpest corners, to stick out slightly. Let me show you closely. So first, you put your sharpest or your diagonals on each other, and those little corners need to stick out. And the reason for this is when you unfold it, that's going to be your seam allowance. You can measure it if you want. If you want all your seam allowances to be the same, I just eyeball it. And the reason you want those to stick out is that when you unfold your bias tape, you want it to be smooth. You don't want it to be uneven when you've joined it. So again, I'll show you again. Right sides together, you join bunny ears. So you have your sharpest corners pointing away from each other. And then you also want those corners to stick out for your seam allowance. And just pin them in place. You can do this with all your strips at once and you'll have one long strip. And then all you need to do is sew a straight stitch to attach those pieces to each other.